relationships in gaming to me, I like to, when I'm playing a game, I like to have a reason to go forward, to do whatever it is that I'm doing. While it is fun to blow the heads off of things, I like to at least have a reason to be blowing the heads off of things.
Right.
And I mentioned
It's very nice you're not a sociopath. So.
Yeah, I'm not a sociopath. Well, like mentioning The Last of Us earlier, the relationship between Joel and Ellie, that ending would have been completely different if Ellie had been escorted by anybody else. Had it been Marlene, it would have been a totally different story. Right. But by the relationship Joel had with Ellie and how that paralleled the relationship he had with his daughter, when I don't want to give away too much for anybody who's played it, but then again it's an opening cutscene, so it doesn't really give too much away. But his daughter that had died, the fact that all of a sudden he's got another girl here who's basically the same age as his daughter, and how that affected Joel as to going forward and wanting to protect Ellie, and why it was so important to keep her safe. If it were anybody else, even if it were somebody who had never had a kid, it would be a totally different situation.
Right.
Yeah, I can't now play that game ever. Now I'm so.
Sorry.
It's beautiful. It is a beautiful game, and you know, a lot of it was just when I was playing it, all I could do was I have to see what happens next. And to me, that is kind of going to become more of a trend in gaming, where it's going to become more cinematic. So you're wanting to play to see what happens next.
Right.
And I could not put that controller down, and I would just, I remember catching myself, I played for 4 hours straight. And usually I can't do that because then I start to get migraines, and, which I had the whole next day. But it's just because that story was just so intense. I just had to know what happened. And I've always been very big into character development because I've acted since I was 12. So I like to get into the characters' heads. I like to analyze characters. It's a lot of fun. And Zelda, for example, I'm a huge fan of Link and Zelda together. It's often called Z-Link shipping. I say they belong together. I think it's adorable. Skyward Sword, for example, what I loved about Skyward Sword was the fact that this was one of the first times Link really had a reason to go save Zelda. It wasn't just the typical, oh, I have to go save her because it is my duty. He had to save her because that was somebody he cared about. The stakes were so much higher because that was somebody he knew personally. It wasn't just some rando girl that, oh, by the way, you're the chosen one and we need you to go save her and save the world.
Yeah.
It gave it a completely different feeling.
Yeah, it's like, in most of the games, it's just like, okay, you're the only one capable of doing this. She's your princess. You owe your kingdom this duty.
Right, exactly. And, you know, that's what makes Majora's Mask stand out as so different from the other games, because that is strictly a character-driven game. Yes, Link goes on a quest, and he does all these dungeons and all that, but...
4 dungeons.
Yeah, whatever. Dungeons, who cares? But... it's still incredibly character-driven. I mean, it starts off with him looking for for his best friend. I mean, he's looking for Navi. That's where it starts off, and you're already like heartbroken that he can't find her. And then the scene with Tattle and Tail and Skull Kid, and when they first met, I was in tears when I saw them meet Skull Kid for the first time. When Skull Kid was like sitting there by himself, no friends. It was so sad. And then you wanted to know what was going on with Skull Kid stealing the mask and why he was going crazy. And then, of course, there was the Anju and Cafe quest. That's a major story plot right there.
Yeah.
But that is what drove that whole game, and I think that's why so many people like it so much, is because of all the characters. For once you actually care about them, you're not just doing it because, oh, I have to do this in order to get the bow and arrow, or I have to do this to get a heart container. You're doing this because you really want the characters to be happy. You want to help them. And,
right.
And that, to me, when it comes to gaming, is very important.
Yeah, no, I kind of want to, yeah, because I agree with you, but what I think kind of interesting, kind of throwing it back a little bit to when we were talking about, you know, the drama in Ocarina of Time compared to it being a film. I honestly feel that the things that motivate things in a game, like the things I want to be in a game, are very different than the things I want to watch for 2 hours as a different narrative. And I think that Majora's Mask really hits those points really well. Instantaneously, you're kind of thrown into this world. You know it's a little later. Because one of the things I really liked was the Hylian shield had been made for him as a child. And that's clearly because they're cheering his name afterwards. And I was like, oh, you do get your party. Because that's one of the things that pissed me off about Ocarina of Time. You get sent back in time. They all have a party without you. You know, like, oi! And at the end, what the hell was this? No, I was like, I saved the world. I don't get a kiss from a princess. She sends me back in time. No, you have to go back in time. And I go back, and they're like, no one knows I've done anything. I'm like, 16 years? Rubbish.
That's awesome and so very true.
I never even thought about that. Because
this was literally my reaction in primary school. It was kind of like, I seem to remember something that kind of wasn't there, but I just remember this moment where Ganondorf just kind of like goes, you know, you've come here all this way and you have the Triforce of Courage. You didn't seem to come here on your own, didn't you? And I was like, and I remember feeling, yeah, I think I have. I played this game for a week. I'm shit at games because I'm young, and I've been here for ages. It was all me, baby, not this sodding Triforce of Courage. But apparently that doesn't happen in the game, so it's something I've completely fabricated myself.
Yeah.
Just had this rage for no reason playing the game. I don't know what.
Yeah. Maybe you had a differently translated version of the game.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Well, I can see where you're coming from, because in Ocarina, it's all about Link doing all of this. You feel alone. I mean, you start off the game, you're in Kokiri Forest, you're the boy without a fairy, so you're naturally already alone.
Yeah.
So you're having to do all this crap by yourself and trying to accomplish all of this. So that is definitely more of a game of accomplishing things.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got this incessant fairy in the background where you're stabbing someone in the face, going, shut up, I'll deal with you later, fairy. And then you press up C, and then she just tells, to kill this enemy, you must stab him in the face. And you're like, who is doing it? Could you not have some auto-detect thing written into the game saying, if you're stabbing him in the face, maybe don't tell him to stab him in the face? You know, and so, yeah. I'm very active when I play games. I like shouting at the screen.
I do that too.
And catchphrases through the games.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of very different. But yeah, going back to the story thing, you're talking about having that reason. I think that's the reason the Zelda works really well for me, is that it's that purpose. It's a very simple goal. You must go save the princess. And then they just throw obstacles in your way, and then that creates a more complex story. I'm not sure that necessarily works kind of for linear storytelling, but in that kind of active, well, I suppose it is linear storytelling, but it's active linear storytelling in gameplay where you kind of have to get to the next point. And, you know, even in Tomb Raider, you know, it was just like, you just have to get off the island. It's very simple. Just get off the island. And so I wasn't really too concerned with that. I was having too much fun killing people in hilarious and inventive ways. Yeah.
The thing about the Wind Waker, you were mentioning earlier, you were saying it wasn't the Triforce, it was me that did all of this. The thing about the Wind Waker that sort of sets it apart from other Zelda games, it's the only Zelda game that I'm aware of where Link doesn't already have the Triforce of Courage. He has to go and find the pieces of the Triforce, and then he proves himself to be the hero.
But that's more like the original games, isn't it? You know, the original Legend of Zelda. He doesn't have it in A Link to the Past either.
I don't know. I remember in the first two Zelda games there were only 2 pieces of the Triforce, so...
Yeah, it's a Triforce. Why is it called Triforce?
But there's only 2 pieces.
Yeah.
It's got 3 sides. It's got the... We're fine. We can rationalize it out in the press. You know?
Yeah. It was part of the DLC that just never got released.
Yeah, that's right. I seem to remember, because I remember, like, I kind of, like, when I was doing my research for the script, I was kind of like, is there only 2 pieces of the Triforce in the original thing? And in the game, yes, there is only 2 pieces of Triforce, but in, like, the esoterica material, the Triforce of Courage does exist. I don't know if they've gone back and rewritten it though? Because it seems like something they've gone, oh yeah, no, there is a third piece. It's there. And it's just like, if you get it now, it's like, what if you get an original one? Well, you can't find those anywhere. They're fine. You know, and I kind of, it feels a bit weird that it was just like, there was going to be this third piece and it never materialized, and then it started to materialize.
Maybe that third piece was in Link's heart the whole time.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe I'm wrong. He does.
He had a heart of courage.
Exactly. Oliver, I was going to ask you if you played Skyward Sword.
Actually, no, because I didn't have a Wii.
All right.
It was at the point in my time where I was poor. I couldn't afford a console.
Right,
I played Twilight Princess around a friend's house, but I didn't play Skyward Sword. I have watched the walkthrough incessantly. I had them playing on the loop in the background while I was writing, so I just picked stuff up without thinking about it. I was just like, that's easy.
All right. Because one of the things I was going to bring up, it goes back to Amanda's topic with relationships. Skyward Sword sort of had a couple of weird love triangles between Link and
Biff Tannen.
What?
Biff Tannen, obviously, for the famous people. Skyward Sword.
But between Link, Zelda, and Groose, because Link had a friendly crush on Zelda. Zelda had the same feelings for Link, but Groose was head over heels in love with Zelda. But Zelda just seen Groose as the big bully that tries to muscle his way around Skyloft, which is the place where everybody lives. And because of the relationship between Link and Zelda, because they're so close, he feels the need to bully Link because of jealousy. And what makes it even more interesting is Groose resembles the looks of Ganondorf, or at least the ancestors of the Gerudo tribe.
I so did not get that, because I kept thinking of him looking like Biff Tannen from the Back to the Future series. So I was kind of like, I loved that, and I was like, wow, you've clearly marketed this game to me. This is brilliant. And you bring that up and you go, oh yeah, that makes a hell of a lot more sense. But like, I didn't read that at all into the game.
It's because he's taller, muscly,
and got the red hair.
Yeah, the red hair is a big giveaway. And then I believe he's the only one with vibrant red hair in Skyloft. So
he's who Demise will possess to become Ganondorf, that lineage. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Say that again?
Well, at the end, it's like when Demise is defeated by Link, it's like I will do something, possess someone, and then that's his spirit will go into someone's lineage.
Demise...
It could be whatever kid Groose ends up helping pop out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Ganondorf is technically in Skyward Sword.
Ganondorf is a reincarnation of Demise's... The evil that's within Demise is the reincarnation, or Ganondorf is the reincarnation of Demise. I believe is the best way to put it. And then I guess Groose's great grandchild is just the one that ends up falling victim to the reincarnation.
Because Zelda didn't love him back.
See, my theory, I have a different theory. I definitely can see where the Ganondorf theory could come into play. My theory for the love triangle, though, is that Groose is gay. And I'm not trying to sound inappropriate or like I'm pushing the gay agenda or whatever, or insensitive or anything like that. But I really
in the UK, gay marriage is legal now, so we're all okay with it.
I really think Groose is gay, that he is hiding, he's closet gay, and that's why he's so obsessed with Link. Otherwise, and I think he's using Zelda as a cover, and he may even not realize it at the time. Maybe he's still questioning what he is, but I really think Groose is gay.
I love this. The first time I've ever heard Zelda be called a beard for someone before.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask what your thoughts on the little love triangle was, but I guess now we know.
Because once they got down to the surface, Groose turned out to be a totally nice guy, and he accepted that Link and Zelda were together, and he was hanging out with Grandma. And I don't know. I think he's gay. It's no big deal. I just think he is.
I read that slightly differently. It's like, because I went to an all-boys school, and then when we get to sixth form, which is kind of like, wow, but when we get to sixth form, we then have a kind of mixed school, but there's also a girls' school there. So some of our classes are in the girls' school, and so you can see, like, when the boys kind of fight, they'll punch each other in the face, they'll have this big fight. By the end of the day, they'll shake hands, like, "Oh, right, mate, how you doing?" But girls, they'll keep their grudges, and I was just like, kind of like, I would much rather be in a boys' school if they threatened me with a pipe than I really would ever be in a girls' school. I was kind of like, oh my god, I can't deal with this anymore.
Oh no, it is absolutely true. We will hold on to a grudge for years. Whereas guys can just beat the crap out of each other and be like, all right, we're cool.
Right,
Another...
the Groose thing, that's what I saw with Link. When Zelda wasn't around, they would fight together, and then when she was around, they would go head at it. And so it was kind of more of a guy relationship than it was a closet homosexual one.
That's possible too.
Yeah.
Right. The other little love triangle that I was referring to, there is a side quest within Skyward Sword where one of Groose's little henchmen is in love with another girl. I forgot both of their names, but there's a certain part in the game where I believe he gives you, or somebody gives you, a letter that he wrote to the girl saying...
Colin? Is it Colin?
No, Colin was the kid in Twilight Princess.
Ah.
I think. It was like Callan, or maybe it was just a different spelling of Colin.
I think it was like C-A-W-L-I-N.
Yeah, it was C-A-W-L-I-N. Okay, I guess because, there we go.
Right.
The translation was really bad from Japanese to English.
Yeah, but the note that you're given, you played Majora's Mask, right, Oliver?
Yeah.
Did you, Simon?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember in Icona Canyon, it's where the 4th dungeon's located, the house that's surrounded by the zombie-like redeads?
Oh, with the scientist father?
Yeah, I believe that's where there's a hand that comes out of the toilet. Is that right, Amanda?
Yeah.
Okay. In Skyward Sword, there's a similar thing. Every time you go to the bathroom while it's nighttime, you'll hear voices coming from the bathroom. And at a certain part in the game, after you're given the letter, the voice asks for paper to wipe. So you can either choose to give him the love note, or you can not give the hand the love note. And whether you do or you don't, I believe if you do, the boy ends up being haunted by the ghost in the toilet for loving the girl. And if you give it to the girl, I believe they end up having some sort of relationship. And if they don't end up in the relationship, then the girl ends up in a relationship with somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is your thoughts on that huge, complex little thing that I had to recall from 4 years ago?
I liked it. I liked also the fact that you had 2 possible endings for it. Like, you couldn't do both.
Right.
I thought that was really cool. I mean, I'm obviously the worst person to play games because I literally play them and do the worst things possible. What happens if you break this wall down? And I'm like the most mischievous person, so obviously I didn't help Carolyn out. I was like, hashtag moo ha 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 ha. But, like that sort of happens when I'm kind of like that. But there's part of me that likes the fact that a game is a very different experience for one person to another person. And I thought really kind of exemplified that.
Right.
With it. Yeah.
Alright, out of every Zelda game, which character do you think would be the most likely to end up with Link? And
Zelda.
I would like... Who?
Zelda.
Alright. Because I would think the most logical would be Malon from Lon
I am
Ranch.
okay with that pairing. I am okay with that one, but the rest of the time he needs to be with Link. Link and Zelda can be together in every other game, but that one I'm okay with Malon.
But I think
There's literally Marin, which is literally the girl of Link's dreams. So,
right. And,
yeah.
what was I going to say? The one that I think would be most likely to happen is I think Princess Ruto would kidnap Link and use him as a husband slave.
Aw, I love Princess Ruto.
Yeah.
I love her
no,
so
I can
much.
see that.
Because she was the only one that was demanding an engagement and everything, which I will say, what was his name? The farmer that looks like Mario?
Ingo?
No, Ingo was the stable hand,
Okay.
and Talon was the big bushy moustache.
Right. Yeah, Talon, earlier in the game when you first meet him, he mentions something about you and his daughter getting engaged or something. And then
Yeah.
when you wear the Gerudo mask and you talk to him, he says that you look similar to his ex-wife, which implies that he was married to a Gerudo. And which would mean Malon would be half Gerudo.
That would explain the red hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Odd little trivia.
No,
I think that's
because-
funny because I've cosplayed as both Malon and Nibiru. So that's kind of funny.
No, I was just thinking when you said that like Talon was kind of like made that statement that you would marry his daughter,
Right.
it kind of really affected the way I wrote him. And I don't know why, but I wrote him, I don't know if you have this stereotype in the States, I wrote him as a Cockney, right? And he was just like this know-it-all guy and wouldn't stop speaking. Oh no, yeah, this, yeah, right, you keep going, I'll tell you how you do this, you do this like this. And yeah. And I kind of like couldn't, I'd have to get someone to get rid of the accent because obviously it wouldn't really work in a legend. But that's how I wrote the rhythm of the speech. Because there's this point where he's in like a bar, Link's in the bar and he's young, and he's doing this archery thing that I wrote, and it's a contest and you win the contest. I can't remember what you get from it. Wrote the script so I didn't have to remember. But the idea is that all of these big archers, do it, and they can't get the third arrow to hit the third target. So Link just puts 3 on the bow, spits them, and just goes shoots all 3. But Talon's in the background telling all of the archers how to shoot. Going, oh, you know what I like that. But you know what your problem is, mate? You've got this problem like that, and they're all really skilled, and he's rubbish. And I just love this idea that he was just this kind of guy. And then there's one bit where, he's really cheeky. And you can see it's all to get a rise out of someone. And so that kind of line for me, that's kind of who the character was in the game.
I like that.
I could sort of see that because whenever he has you play his cuckoo finding game, or however it's pronounced, he acts overly excited and surprised once you find all of them.
Yeah. Especially if you do it the Zelda dungeon way and put all of the chickens in the corner, so he only throws the ones out that you've got to find. So I was like, yeah. It's like, I was like, how did you do it so fast?
Right. What about you, Simon? What would you put Link in a relationship? Which character do you see him going after?
I think it's been a long time since I've played, so I can't give you a good answer.
The good answer is Zelda.
A good answer is Zelda. That's quite honest. I would also have to say, someone from his home village, that he grew up with.
So
would probably be the most likely. You know what I'm saying? But Zelda would be my answer.
Good answer.
Because
that is correct.
There's part of me, I'm kind of torn between Malon and Zelda, because I really like the story of Long Long Run.
I do like the idea of Malon and Zelda because I think she's adorable.
Yeah, and he gets his horse from her, and there's that
She's a
connection.
cute little country girl. I think it's adorable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this idea that kept popping up in my mind every time that I wrote the feature, was that the aftermath is because time has reset, Zelda and Link's relationship never flourishes like it does when Ganondorf exists in the world.
Such a sad ending.
And so Link grows up and marries Malon, and so you see these kind of timelines diverge.
And that does make sense. In that timeline split, then absolutely.
Right.
But, yeah.
Alright. Is there anything else any of you would like to add to the topic? Any other games that had notable relationships?
Wind Waker had a very notable relationship between Link and his sister. It wasn't...
Yeah.
Because relationships in games, they don't have to necessarily be romantically driven. That's why I'd mentioned The Last of Us earlier, because, I mean, that was basically a father-daughter relationship between Joel and Ellie.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you played the DLC in The Last of Us.
I have not played that yet. I know I need to. I need to.
The relationship between her...
Ellie and Riley, I believe.
Yeah. It's odd.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's an odd relationship, so I'm curious to see how that plays out. I need to play that. But Wind Waker is another one that drove the story forward, because Link wanted to go save his sister. It wasn't just, again, it wasn't just I'm the hero, I must go do this. It was, he genuinely wanted to help his sister.
Right.
Yeah. Was anybody else a little annoyed that Tetra turned out to be... Spoiler alert. If you haven't played the Wind Waker.
It's been over 10 years, it's okay.
The Tetra turned out to be Zelda, because I got really annoyed, because Tetra means four. And so I thought it was a fourth person. And I was like, oh, so Nintendo are not being ingenious with their names. They're just damn right lying to us now. And another one of my rage fits while playing this. Just like, could you not design another character, Nintendo?
It's sort of odd, because Zelda turns into Sheik in Ocarina of Time, and then in Wind Waker, she has the Tetra form. But then in Skyward Sword, you find out Zelda is just a reincarnated version of Hylia, I believe. So it's weird to see the different representations of Zelda throughout the games.
I'm not a big... I think I spoke to you about this, Jesse, with the timeline thing. I'm not a big fan of the timeline theory.
Right.
Because when I grew up with the games, I really liked the idea that it was very vague, and it just happened to be in another generation, and that fate would somehow repeat itself. I quite like that. And now structuring it as a timeline kind of bothers me a little, because it's now restricting ideas that were a little more free and open for interpretation before. Like, I actually quite enjoyed, before Hyrule Historic came out, enjoying that Skyward Sword could quite literally be in the future or the past. Because the spirit tracks are there, and the spirit tracks has to be way in the end of the timeline, because it is a sequel to Ocarina of Time. You know, it goes all the way up through the Wind Waker and all the way there, and so it's like, and with all the techno blends and, you know, the Temple of Time being the way it is, it could just be so far in the future that it's a very different story. And then, there have been so many incarnations of it.
Another odd thing about Skyward Sword taking place in the very beginning of the timeline, there's already the ancient cistern, if I said that right, and then all of the ancient robots. So there's been civilizations for probably 1,000 years before, by looking at how ancient the robots were.
Right.
And then you had to go back in time to wake the robots up. So even though it takes place at the beginning of the timeline, you have to go even further back in time. And it's just, well, was there a link before that point where you find out who created these robots?
It seems like Nintendo made a decision. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that's a really good point, because it definitely had to be a long time ago for the ocean to have dried up.
Yeah. But I think Nintendo kind of creatively have just looked at it and gone, they're now going backwards. They've put, you know, the first Legend of Zelda as the furthest most point on the timeline. So the only direction then for them now go is backwards until they realise that they've exhausted all of those stories, and then they'll go forwards again.
Right.
I do like the idea... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, because corporations don't die. They just keep going forwards. They're just like, we need to sell more games, guys. What can we do? Well, we could do a sequel to The Legend of Zelda 2. And, and that's exactly, I think, where they'll go.
I do like the idea, though, of Skyloft being the city in the sky, or rather the city in the sky is the ruins of Skyloft. I really like that theory. That is really cool to think about.
Yeah,
and then
Minish
Cap, which is supposed to be the sequel to Skyward Sword, if you look at the timeline, also has a dungeon in the sky. So, with that game taking place right after Skyward Sword, theoretically, that dungeon could also be the same city in the sky from Twilight Princess and Skyloft's remains from Skyward Sword. Just wondering, Simon, how lost do you feel right now?
Right now, I'm very lost. I haven't played any of the new
As someone
games.
who isn't as well versed in Zelda, what does this all kind of sound like to you? Because I mean, this is just kind of natural stuff for us, but as somebody who I guess would be kind of an outsider, this is kind of an interesting subject just to hear your take on all of this.
Yeah.
Well, basically,
just like, God, these nerds.
No. I'm just pulling out things that do make sense, like the concept of going forward and backwards in time, and it being kind of arbitrary, and now trying to set up a way that it's supposed to flow, and then getting stuck, trying to make new games, and so things like that. I'm getting,
the
but
Biff Tannen reference, right?
Yeah, the whole Zelda timeline.
Just waiting for Bruce to start calling Link Butthead. In fact, I should play through Skyward Sword again. Change my name to Butthead.
Right.
and then screenshot that.
That would trend, I think. Really,
I was thinking, to an outsider, the whole timeline would just sound like a bad Back to the Future cartoon.
Which didn't Nintendo just openly say at one point? They just pretty much made up the timeline that they were like, this looks good.
I think the official timeline, I think it's not, it has absolutely nothing to do with Nintendo's thoughts, just the author of Hyrule Historia. They told him to go ahead and try to make sense of it, and then
So he
they would
pulled
go
it out
with
of
that.
his butt.
Right, I think that's what they did, instead of having their own official, because no matter what you do, there's still plot holes.
Yeah.
So
So he pulled the timeline out of his butt, and anything that doesn't make sense, just go time travel. It's
For me, it's like-
time travel paradox. Another timeline split. We're good.
No, for me, it's hard looking at it for somebody who makes stuff to kind of someone who enjoys stuff at the same time. I kind of look at it and go, I don't know how much they can plan. Sometimes you can get guys and say, I want to deal with this in the next title, but it's so hard to make this stuff at the speed that they go along, and it doesn't even feel, from an audience perspective, it does not feel fast. With Zelda Wii U being delayed, just like another year. But so you kind of work how much of it is just like we wanted a Sky Temple, so we did that for 3 games, and then it just somehow links together because you can make those bridges, or how much of it is, I'll fix that later, with
Right.
this. And kind of
there's another link there. We're just in the next game.
it's like
We'll make another game to fill in that gap.
we'll explain that
That's it.
later.